Brian Trascher has a lot of jobs. He is now a political consultant and just smart guy, but he previously served as the co-chair of the Trump campaign for Louisiana. Mr. Brian, how are you this morning? Thank you for taking time.
I am doing great. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Let's start with, because we got a late-breaking message from you and your folks a couple of minutes ago. Tell us more, because you're a New Orleans guy, or at least down around that area. Tell us more about this, I want to say comedy, but it's not comedy, tragedy of errors about the New Orleans flood that every day the ineptitude of the city is coming to light.
Yeah, I would characterize it more as a Greek tragedy. It started off with probably an above-average rainfall event on Saturday for August, this time of year in New Orleans. And then all of a sudden, the streets started filling up, and it never started going down. And everybody's like, what's going on? Why aren't the pumps on? And the mayor's office, the mayor was in Aspen, at the Aspen Institute with Walter Isaacson, which is ironic, and I'll get to that in a second. Sent out his deputy mayor to read what he had to know was a patently false statement that all 24 pump stations were operating.
Oh, right.
And before you know it, people start posting pictures and videos on social media of, standing at the pump saying these pumps are not on. And by the way, the gates are padlocked. Nobody's here. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
This is literally everything bad that people think about New Orleans in one sad little microcosm, isn't it?
Well, let me tell you why it's really bad. So I mentioned that the mayor at the time was up in Colorado with Walter Isaacson. Walter Isaacson was the head of the Aspen Institute. He was the mastermind, if you will, of this effort to take the monuments down in New Orleans, which whatever side you were on with that issue, it emotionally tore the city apart at its core. It divided people like nothing I've ever seen. And ironically, that's where the mayor was, but, last fiscal year, the mayor and the council had appropriated $3 million in the city budget to clean out the catch basins. Now, you could build $1 trillion. We built $150 billion with a B dollar pump system in New Orleans, but you could build $1 trillion system. But if the catch basins are not cleaned out from trash and debris, then it doesn't matter how good your pumps are because water can't get to the pumps. So that contract was never even let. It was never let out, okay? So an inspection was done after this past flood, and it was determined that only about 30% of the catch basins were cleaned out, and that was all done by private citizens with shovels who were just tired of their driveways getting flooded. The city and no contractor ever cleaned them out. So that $3 million, okay, that was appropriated and never spent,
disappeared.
That just happens to be the exact amount of money that the mayor spent in public funds to take down the monuments after he promised that it was going to be only $150,000 and it was going to be used private funds to get it done. So you have to ask yourself, is that where the cash came from?
Interesting. We could talk about this at length, but we got to get to Mr. Trump and North Korea. Some say his comments were too harsh. Some say we need tough talk for North Korea. Where do you stand? You're close to the situation. Were you surprised by how tough he was talking, and were you glad to hear it?
Well, if you look on Twitter, just about 5 minutes ago, he put out a statement, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of all military options are in place, locked and loaded, and North Korea better back down, is basically what he said. Look, I think that North Korea and the world got used to kind of namby-pamby talk coming from the White House for 8 years. And this president is not like the previous president. He is not a pacifist. He does not believe that if we just get along and be nice to everybody, that the world will just be a happy-go-lucky place. He knows that Kim Jong-un, like his father, is a psychopath. And I personally think, and I'm actually getting on a plane in a couple hours and heading to Manhattan, to the Manhattan White House, if you will, in Trump Tower. But I think that, and this is just my opinion, my speculation, but I believe that there are some people around Kim Jong-un that would really like to have a coup and depose him from office. And I almost feel like all this rhetoric and tough talk Those people don't want war. They don't want war with the United States because they know that means war with the world. And nuclear war is the end game, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that they might just be pushing some people psychologically to a point where they have enough courage to overthrow Kim Jong-un. Otherwise, they're going to be sorry. This president is not playing around.
Were you surprised, despite the criticism of the president and what he had to say in America's left-leaning media, which is about everybody, that despite the way the president was criticized for what he had to say, how quickly leaders around the world stood up to side with the USA?
It doesn't surprise me because, look, a lot of countries and their leaders that are more left-leaning like to beat up on the U.S. for whatever reason. It makes them look good in their own country. But when it comes to matters of war, so goes the United States, so goes the world. And that's when they're going to step up and say, hey, wait a minute. We need to back up the U.S. here. There's no such thing as tough, too tough of talk. The media kept acting like the president was talking about a preemptive strike, and he said nothing of the kind. He said that basically that if North Korea and Kim Jong-un does not back down and start acting right, that they're going to be sorry, that they're going to be met with the fury of God's own thunder. And, recently the president wouldn't rule out a preemptive strike. But again, that's just kind of part of his style. He always deals from a leveraged position of strength. That's how he's run his business, and that's how he's running the country. And I think it's a breath of fresh air compared to what we got for the last 8 years.